But the other thing that we haven't talked about is depth. So your retina is 2-dimensional, right? So it's along the back of your eye, but you experience the world in 3 dimensions. And seeing in 3D is incredibly important for navigating your life. One of my children had problems with his depth perception when he was a small child. It turns out he was only using information from one eye, and you'll find out why that's important in a second. And it manifested as him being incredibly clumsy. We wondered if there was something wrong with his motor development, but in fact there was something wrong with his visual perception. So how do we make sense of depth? How do we go from a 2D image projected onto our retina to this perception that we're living in a 3D world? So there's one class of cues for depth, and these are called monocular cues, so one eye cues. So these are things, depth cues that you get even if you only had the visual information from one eye. When I do that, I realize how much more blind I am in this eye compared to both. So there's a couple of monocular cues that we want you to be aware of. And sometimes these are called pictorial cues because they're the tricks that people who are working in 2-dimensional art are using to give the illusion of depth. So one of these is overlap. Right? So, Cameron, if you can move to both of us for a second, I have my hand in front of Sam's face. Now, y'all are watching this on a 2D screen. How do you know that my hand is in front of Sam's face? Well, it's because you know what the outline of a head looks like and what the outline of a hand looks like, and you can see that this is overlapping and interrupting the shape of his head. Whereas if it's like this, you know that there's my arm and the shape of that has been interrupted by him. So that's overlap, and that's a really important pictorial cue for depth. Another one is what is called height in the field of view. So if you want to look at my computer for a second, we have, a nice pastoral scene. And what I want you to see is that the things that are further away are closer to the middle of the picture, right? So the clouds that are very far away in the sky are down from the edges, they're down from the top of the picture. The part of the road that is far away is up from the edge of the picture. So things converge towards the middle of your field of view as they're further away, whereas they're lower or higher in your field of view when they're closer. Right.
And then this image also shows another important thing, which is linear perspective. So this is from our experience of the world. We have learnt that parallel lines that are in reality parallel, they converge in an image. So we all see this when we look at this picture as a road that is disappearing into the distance. Right? But if you look at what's actually falling on our eyes, it could be just like a triangular piece of road. Right? That's actually what's falling on our retina, but our brain says, no, this is the road because we know the way the world works, and it's just disappearing off into the distance. The other thing you can see here is trees, right? You could say, oh look, the trees that we perceive to being further away, right? Those are actually smaller than the trees are closer to us. We don't think that, they've planted a range of different sized trees. Instead, we think, okay, those trees that, because we know the size of the trees and we're assuming that they're about the same size, we say that those trees that are forming covering a larger part of our retina, those are going to be closer to us than the ones that are further away.
So for instance, to continue with familiar size, we don't interpret this as 3 different sized tennis balls. We think of one tennis ball as closer and one further away and one intermediate, because we are thinking, okay, well, we know how big a tennis ball is, right? So all of these are monocular cues, pictorial cues. They're good, but they're not fabulous.
There's one more, shadows as well.
Oh, yes, you're right. I'm skipping ahead. Yeah, so this is another thing where we are, these little ovals or circles here can look as if they're popping out or indentations, even though, again, this is a 2-dimensional image. So why do we perceive it in a particular way? Something's popping out and something's coming in.
Well, so we have again learnt from our experience in the world, and light tends, on average, in the world we live in, right? Light tends to come from above, and so we realize, okay, that this is what a convex or a concave shape would look like if lit from above. right? And so again, like, as in all of these things, we are essentially using our knowledge of the world to infer whether things are further away from us or closer to us. A way you can reverse this, it's hard to do because we're so used to light coming from above, but if you imagine, and if you can strongly kind of imagine the light coming from below, then you can essentially reverse this, such that the ones that were convex appear concave and the ones that were concave can appear convex. It's hard to do because light nearly always comes from above in our experience.
Yeah. Okay, so I was attempting to say prematurely earlier, these pictorial cues are good but not perfect. And the reason we know that is that when people are blinded in one eye, or in the case of my son, only using the visual stream from one eye, they can have a lot of trouble with depth perception. A really important set of cues for depth perception are binocular cues that have to do with we have two eyes, slightly different information is being sensed by each one of them. How do we make sense of that? And how do we use the disparity?